Dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the co-organizers, the Ukrainian think tank Liaison office in Brussels and the Martens Centre, I'm glad to welcome you at our webinar on Ukraine. We are glad to continue our cooperation to bring Ukraine at the spotlight of the attention of the European Union audience. And today we have chosen the topic, Ukraine's resilience, following long-lasting or recent developments in and around the country, including developments in the political environment. Recently, already 3 ministers have resigned. Pandemia, fight against pandemia and its impact on socio-economic developments of the country, recent escalation of Russian military operation at our borders, and what impact this has on the security of the country. And today we want to discuss this and other factors which impact Ukraine's resilience, sustainability, and its ability to develop into the future. It is my pleasure today to present our speakers. And it will be Mikhail Galer, member of the European Parliament, European People's Party member, Veronika Movchan, Academic Director, Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, and Yuri Yakimenko, President of the Martens Centre. Both are well-known Ukrainian analytical centers. Before I give the floor to the speakers to present today's Ukraine, I would like to encourage our participants, our viewers, now to put their questions and comments, and we will definitely have time by the end of the discussion to put them to our speakers and discuss issues which are of your particular interest. And you can put your questions on Facebook, where we are now live streaming the event. We intend to finish our event sharp in 1 hour. And with this, ladies first, and I give the floor to my colleague Veronika to update us on the economic developments in Ukraine. Veronika, the floor is yours.
Elena, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear friends, dear participants, it's my pleasure and honor to be today and discuss with you the economic situation in Ukraine and the resilience of the Ukrainian economy. It is a new word, it's not new, but it's a new word in our discussions. It's becoming much more important now with the Eastern Partnership also built on the ensuring resilience of the region, including Ukraine. What we have learned from the previous year, I would say that Ukrainian economic resilience increased. Why? We saw that Ukrainian GDP, real GDP, dropped by only 4%. It is much lower than we expected. And it is also better than many economists in the region showed. What happened? Actually, it's a result of reforms and result of diversification. What supported the Ukrainian economy last year? On the one hand, we saw the banking system that remained resilient to the shock. It is the first crisis through which Ukrainian economy went, and it is not the first crisis over the last 30 years, almost 30 years of Ukrainian independence. Then we saw the banking system went basically smoothly without any major problems. It happened because of reforms, because of the cleaning of the banking system, ensuring better competition and at the same time better regulation. Energy sphere. It's a lot of problems remain there, but we have to say that it's much more resilient to the shocks than it was before. With much more diversified supplies of energy resources. What also we saw in the crisis, the resilience of Ukrainian foreign trade. especially exports, because we saw the reduction in trade with the European Union was very much compensated with the growth of trade with China. There is not the same products, some of them the same, some of them are not. But the diversification of trade flows and product diversification allowed balancing the shock. Also, if we are talking about foreign trade, we should not forget about services. IT, the growing importance of IT services and digital, they're very helpful for these sustainability, to some extent, of the Ukrainian economy. On the other hand, definitely there are much more to ensure resilience and much more to ensure sustainability, because what we saw here is the importance of changes and no backtracking of change. And regretfully, we see in Ukraine that the reforms and achievements of the previous year have been gradually, if not ruining, but slowing or even moving backward. And here I see one of the problems and a question how to ensure this long-run resilience of the country and sustainability of changes, disregarding the political shocks, political environment. Basically, if we're talking about resilience as such and Ukrainian resilience, we should think about diversification, about competition, and about flexibility and readiness to innovate and move into the new dimensions. We saw that partially in Ukraine, and that would help Ukrainian economy. But we need much more in the future, and I hope we will be able to discuss that during this hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronika. Thank you for giving us this picture on economic area. And before I move to floor to our next speaker, I would like to ask all the speakers to mute themselves when they're not speaking, because we unfortunately had some sound difficulties. Now we are moving to Pane Yuri Yakimenko, and to provide us update on political and security areas. Pane Yuri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elena. Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for invitation to the seminar. It's very timely event because, as Elena said already, the context around Ukraine is changing, and there are a lot of proceedings that are not in our favor, starting with COVID and ending with aggravation of tension with Russia on our borders. But anyway, all that factors influence Ukraine's resilience, and some of them makes us stronger, because resilience is the ability of system to manage crisis with its own sources and even exploit them for self-development and self-improving purposes. I picked up this definition from seminar in Chatham House on the topic of Ukrainian resilience held in 2018. And dealing with political and security spheres, I'd like to propose to scale somehow our resilience on 4 scale grade from high, sufficient, vulnerable, and low, and trying to say, to define where is our resilience now in these spheres. I start with general statement that the most important factors of resilience of Ukraine are strengthening of Ukrainian statehood, European and Euro-Atlantic integration, continuation of reforms in various spheres, and the most important, creating of better living conditions and standards for our citizens. If we take particular spheres, as time is limited, I would like to pick up the main factors that strengthen resilience or are a factor of vulnerability, on the contrary. In political spheres, what are favorable factors to resilience in Ukraine? First of all higher institutions of power, president, parliament, government, hold common political positions on Ukraine's course towards EU and NATO integration. Most parliamentary political forces support Ukraine's European integration and its Euro-Atlantic course, and one of these forces fully forms the government. Pro-Russian parties enjoy the support of a minority of Ukrainian population. The majority of Ukrainians supports Ukrainian European integration. It's 62% according to our recent poll, and Ukrainian accession to NATO, 54% in April. There are developed institutions of civil society which support the course of Ukraine's European integration, as well as implementation of reforms. And what we observed recently, and the Ukrainian authorities actively oppose the subversive Russian influence in Ukraine in various spheres and its agents, which are factors of vulnerability in politics. The authorities lack a strategic vision of the development of country and society, and this causes inconsistency of governmental policies in different spheres, ambiguity of the implementation of reforms in different areas. The balance of power in the president-parliament-government triangle is obviously shifted towards the president. The president and his political force, in fact, has a monopoly on policy making, and some of pro-European parties, surprisingly, but they are in opposition and have no opportunity to influence effectively the policy-making process. There is a lack of accountability of government because the parliament, controlled by a pro-presidential majority, cannot adequately exercise its control powers. Judicial reform is incomplete. The influence of other governmental institutions on judiciary and internal problems, including corruption, has negative political implications. There is also tension between the president power and some local self-governmental bodies, and the last example, it's Kiev and its Mayor Klitschko. And decentralization reform has not been completed at the constitutional level. What can be added is that society is very vulnerable to political populism and manipulations. If we try to define the level of resilience in political sphere, I can say that it may be somewhere in between vulnerable and sufficient, so it is in the middle. If you take a security sphere, so then situation is looking better in the sphere of military security and defense capacities in Ukraine. Here, factors that contribute to resilience are the following. Preparedness of the state, its armed forces, other security structures, and society as a whole to repel the external aggressor. The majority of the population, more than 50%, are prepared to defend their country. The armed forces and other security structures have a high level of public confidence that is higher than governmental institutions, much more higher. The next stage on reforms in the security and defense sector has been completed in 2014-2016 and has been completed recently. A new national security strategy and military security strategy has been approved. And of course, the very important factor of resilience is an active cooperation of Ukraine with international partners in security sphere and in deterrence to Russia, which are factors of vulnerability. Lack of reliable external security guarantees. We're speaking about this factor every time. It does not allow to resist a stronger enemy. Limited resources and incompleted reform of national security system, preservation of some negative traits inherited from the Soviet Union, from the Soviet system. If you take civil security, here situation look a bit different and probably somehow worse. But here also we must mention the factors that contribute to resilience. It's a progress in law enforcement reform, again, thanks to the EUAM advisory mission, serious structural reform and other changes has been done, first of all in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Progress in countering hostile informational influence and misinformation, programs in cybersecurity and defense, and factors of vulnerability. Here we must mention COVID pandemic and response to that. We think that this response was not sufficient enough. And first of all, we should mention the failure of the vaccination campaign. And yesterday's fire of Minister of Healthcare scare is information of that. Incomplete reform of the judiciary, problems with citizen access to fair justice, the problem of corruption, and low level of media literacy of the population, vulnerability to manipulations and misinformation. So here situation, again, also is somewhere in between sufficient and vulnerable. It is better in a sphere of military security and defense, and a bit worse in a sphere of civil security. But again, we are doing not so bad here, and here it's at on an average level. Also, we could speak now about measures for strengthening truth resistance, but I think we are at the end of time now. Probably we'll continue with them later. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Mr. Yakimenko, for giving us a very comprehensive picture and given both the strengths and vulnerabilities in each of the area. And thank you again for bringing the assessment of the population factor into the whole picture. And yes, indeed, we will continue in the question and answers everything what you think would be even more to add into given this picture. And again, I address to the audience, please don't be shy, ask your questions, put your comments, and we will have time to engage you, because we see you as an equal participant to our today's event. And now we are moving to Mr. Geller with a particular question. To your mind, how European Union and international community can further contribute to increasing Ukrainian resilience in those times? Mr. Geller, the floor is yours.
Yes,
again,
thank you
I'm asking all speakers to mute themselves, because I hear again some signs. I think it's Mr. Yakimenko. Thank you. Mr. Geller, the floor is yours now.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you also for the two introductions from the speakers before. And I think that has already given a good overview. I'm still hearing sounds.
Yes, me too. Let's wait to Razumkov Center to switch off the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, of course, when nobody speaks,
but I don't see the sign of switched off.
It's a problem with switching it to on.
No, it's okay.
Okay, we continue.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. And the two previous speakers have of course addressed the major issues in this regard. And when it comes to the support of the European Union, I think I still hear people, but
yes,
perhaps they are from elsewhere.
Yes, I would like to ask, пане Юрію, це у вас, якщо ви можете попросити когось вимкнути мікрофон.
Пані Олено, я зараз вимкну, ви скажете, чуєте ви мене чи ні?
Ну, ми вас не чуємо, але він як включений йде. Все одно.
Sorry, just a moment, I'll ask our technical.
Yes, please so.
Okay. So when he's gone, he will not speak then. No. Well, the framework, of course, of the European Union and our possibilities to contribute to further strengthening resilience and the development is, of course, our association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement. And on this, in this huge framework, we can really, together with our Ukrainian partners, address the issues that are at stake. And indeed, one said, on the one hand, there is a common political position of the major institutions when it comes to EU and NATO perspectives, and in let's say the democratization of the country and modernization in general. But there is this lack of strategic vision. So to say that everything that is done is really done in a systematic way, and there is legislation coming, and at the beginning of the legislature, with the new government, new president, new party in charge, we saw the turbo legislation in the best intentions, probably. I'm not doubting that. But when you do something in turbo mode, perhaps at some point the quality might be lacking or might be suffering from that. So I think that the different reform and strategies for the different policy areas, I think the resilience will be strengthened if indeed the so to say the consistency and the accountability of such a process, if that were guaranteed, and if we did not, so to say, at some point suddenly see backlashes. Now it's not backlashes in a sense that all of a sudden the parliament changes its mind, but we see backlashes from the back or somewhere from outside the formal institutions, and that is of course due to the fact that there is still too much oligarchic and non-formal influence in all the processes, because there are still too many who would like to interfere into ongoing legislation or into reform processes because they see their established interests in danger. And that is, of course, the purpose of the reforms is to get away with the privatization of public interest, to put it this way. And that is where the European Union, where we are really coming in and when we are insisting that, so to say, the best intentions are not torpedoed or not disturbed by those who have their private interests in the foreground. And we have seen that in the Constitutional Court. We see it when it is about the concrete attempt to dismantle the reform institutions. And I think resilience will be strengthened if indeed those institutions that have been set up in order to make a difference, like NABU or ZAPO, or all those institutions that should clean up with the corruption, that should be independent also in their work from a current government, Prosoro, something like that in the economic area, and I could name others. If they are not disturbed when they become having an effect, and I think the fact that the reforms in Ukraine gain ground and have an effect, have this counter effect from the old structures, and that is where we would be willing definitely to come in and to be helpful and to ring the alarm bell. For instance, I have the impression now currently, but we don't have the final assessment yet. Why is it now that all of a sudden now 3 ministers are about to be released? Why is it these 3? Why is it not others? Have they done something particularly wrong? Maybe. Okay, that is one thing. Or I see a presidential decree that on the one hand has the title on the annual national program under the auspices of the NATO Ukraine Commission for 2021. Well, I thought then something with defense, but no, it's about local self-government and decentralization. My suspicion is, as that is a very successful thing, as people on the ground are having competences, having money to spend, can show that they are working well or less well, there is now, perhaps ahead of the presidential election, the attempt to re-erect the power vertical, to have a counterweight against too much self-administration on the local level. I think that is not consistent. That is not about strategic vision, but that is about irritation. It is the country needs, and that is what we insist, really this steadiness or accountability of a reform. When the self-administration, when the decentralization gains ground and settles, and there were elections and they are coming, then there should not be a counter movement to set up parallel structures or to, as I said, re-erect the power vertical. There are perhaps in the Bankova, not even the president himself, but there are people who have some post-Soviet reflexes. local self-administration is a right that the local communities have. It's not a mercy that is granted from above. So that is that is Soviet thinking. We grant a mercy from above. It's our nice attitude. No, there is a right of the local communities to administer themselves and to have the necessary funding and to be in this regard self-sufficient. So these are the things where we would then come in and say, hey, friends, you are on a good track, but there are these hiccups where there is a need to prevent that. Perhaps I leave it there in order not to be too long.
Thank you, Mr. Geller, to remind us about actually, indeed, the recent developments with the reform process in Ukraine and where the stop blocking factors inside of this process. We unfortunately didn't yet receive some questions from the audience, and we are still waiting, and again, encourage everyone to put the questions. So with this, I would like to address the speakers. Maybe you would like to ask a question to your colleagues to precise some information which has been given already. Is there anyone who would like to? So no? Okay, as the moderator, this is the difficulties of moderating, right? So I would then ask this question, the question which I always like. It's what I call them like a blitzkrieg. And maybe repetitive, but to boost our participants' imagination and their questions. And to precise, can you name just like 3 main things which you consider the most important to keep or to increase Ukraine's resilience right now in your areas or in any other area which you consider the most important for the country? Don't be afraid to repeat yourself or to sum up some of your already expressed thoughts. Okay, Veronica, yes, ladies first.
Yeah, just to start and then Caesar to answer. Basically, I want to echo what was said, that we need probably the fundamental thing, this is rule of law, we can call it judicial system, and actually here I would also add anti-corruption efforts, because I think that all of that is amalgamated together with a working judicial system that would ensure the efficiency of anti-corruption efforts to a large extent. So basically, I'm not sure that this is a low-hanging fruit. Actually, I'm sure it's not, but it's the fundamental thing. What else can extend resilience is actually respect to institutions. The problem, what it was described already today, is that we have institutions developed under this COVID crisis, I would say so. A lot of things were like done and continue to be done disregarding the general practices or rules. Several examples, more longer term examples, public service reform. We have actually for a long time, we had abolished competitions for the appointment of public servants during the current time. But a lot of people were replaced and changed and appointed without competition. And it's bad here, actually, because the public service reform is one of the other fundamental elements of the democracy and working governance. But very few days ago, we had the introduction of the regulation for price of gasolines and diesel in the country for the current time period. First, it's for me, I think it's completely inappropriate to intervene into the market prices, whatever reason, if there are anti-monopoly committee, there are other instruments, but also that you intervene without discussion because of current times. So we increase unpredictability, and that gives us the big problem. Mr. Galler said also about these ministries who were like fired, rooted to leave their office actually yesterday. There were a lot of rumors about that, but really the decision making remains completely untransparent. So not obeying the institution and legal structures, the ad hoc changes, unpredictable changes, that creates a much stronger impact than just the change of names or the change in the like what product we want to consider. It's an indication that we don't have a strong institutions, we do not obey rules. That is so it should return back. And if we are talking about what other thing to increase resilience versus rule of law, second, respect to institutions, and third one, ensuring competition and so we allow competition that brings flexibility, that brings diversification. Because resilience, ability to withstand shocks, it's much higher than we have diversity in economics. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Veronica. For this point of view, who would like to continue? I see Mr. Ekin.
Okay, I'd like to continue with some points that Veronica has taken already. What we need now is, it seems to me, is that we have to restore some basic principles of operation of our governmental systems that has been distorted after double elections in 2019. Because now we have a system very unbalanced and shifted balance to the president, as I said. And now we have a lot of constitutional provisions and principles of decision making has been broken. Starting that we don't have a program of activity of our governmental, of our coalition, in fact, faction with the rights of coalition in the parliament. They have their own rights, but they don't perform their duties. We had governments that worked without approved by the Verkhovna Rada programs of their activity. We have a lack of systematic approach in almost in all spheres. And we have exprompts in continuation or reverse of some reforms. We had very hardly understood situation in the reform of healthcare, for instance, when COVID pandemic has started. We have the same situation in other spheres. We have voluntarist approaches to decision-making process and to very important laws adopted by this Verkhovna Rada already. Mr. Galler has already mentioned the turbo regime. I agree completely that not everything is good that has been done in this turbo regime. The quality of decision making, the quality of legislation is suffering from such approaches. Not very good understood initiatives to amend the constitution in different spheres, starting with the system of governance changing, reduction of number of deputies of Verkhovna Rada. There are no calculations, no basic, and so on and so forth. So we to be ready for to move forward with our resilience capacities, we have to restore these principles in organizational system of government. First of all, because institutions means more than the people who are in those institutions. And if the next elections we have the next president, it would be good that the Institute of Presidency work within the framework proposed by the Constitution. Why the problem with Constitutional Court has appeared? On one hand, it is really a problem of corruption of different influences to the persons in Constitutional Court. But on the other hand, within the process of constitutional amendments introducing before, there were some things that then have an outcome with such kind of crisis. That there were no other way, no other solutions, despite decree of the president based on the decision of Council of National Security and Defense. So if we starting to step from the constitution aside in one thing, then we probably will have such kind of outcomes, and they lead us to the crisis. So the way to prevent those crises is not to do such kind of steps. So be on the basis of constitution and act within its norms. That's what we need. Of course, we need such basic principles as rule of law applied in different spheres, because sometimes when we are speaking about very popular slogans like de-oligarchization, fighting of corruption, in fact, we see under this cover political struggle, political fighting, firing political opponents now or in the future. Why Mr. Klitschko appears in yesterday news in Kyiv? Is it by accident, or are there any other reasons for that? There are suspicions in society and different versions among experts and politicians and so on. So I think that the problem of accountability of government is the second problem. So first, it's a constitutional background. Second, the problem of accountability, rule of law, and of course, not enough transparency of this government. A lot of things, they are under the veil of some kind of, don't know, or appealing to the public opinion or appealing to the some things that are not known enough for society. So it appears a problem, and I think if we would have a more order in these governmental institutions now and in this distribution of powers and activity, so the level of resilience in political sphere at least will be higher.
Thank you, Pani Yuria. Just to inform you that we have some questions from the audience, but we finish first with Mr. Geller on the question on these three main things to be done.
Well, indeed, I think the judicial reform is the framework of many reforms, and things like the High Anti-Corruption Court is, of course, an in-between, so to say, a transitional period, because at the end, every court must be a kind of anti-corruption court and be in a position to judge on corruptive behavior. But as the judiciary is not yet reformed, it is necessary for a period to have such a high anti-corruption court and to let him work in connection with NABU. Yeah? I mean, NABU should have prepared the files, and now they end up in the high anti-corruption court is one thing. And these should be let do their work and not be disturbed as it is ongoing with NABU. I'm really upset about such behavior, and the motivation in my mind cannot be a constructive one when it is ongoing, regardless who initiates it or who is behind. So that is for me, let the point, let the judicial reform gain ground and do the changes in a constitutional way, and not in a way to say, well, there is an unconstitutional court ruling from the constitutional court, so I get away with the constitutional judges. That's not the constitutional way. I mean, we all know that over many years, this judicial reform has been delayed and obstructed, and not only in Ukraine. We see it in Georgia, we see it in Moldova, we see it even in some EU countries. I have the impression that the judiciary is under political manipulation, or so you are not alone in this regard, but it is the framework for trust of the citizens, but also from foreign investors. I'm upset when I still hear that investors from the European Union are complaining that they are getting undue suggestions from certain civil servants to change certain figures and then share the difference amongst them, to put it this way. So they must be sure when I come to Ukraine and invest, I find a court system, a judiciary where I can rely on and where I don't have to pay bribes. Yeah, that is an essential of that all. And so then also the accountability and transparency, how governance takes place. Indeed, for me, the Bankova is a black hole. It's nothing where I would see any transparency or the will of the government and the president also in a way reasonably deductible, so to say, that I know, aha, that comes from here or there, but suddenly something pops up and then you don't know how, was it the result of a political consideration or just a quick idea of the president or of Mr. Yermak? So these are things, I mean, in an established democracy like mine in Germany, we have a law, we have laws governing the proceedings in the different ministries, in the ministries. So every minister knows along which path he has to govern. We have laws on all the procedures so that not such surprises can pop up suddenly, and so that there is accountability. So transparent accountability as a second thing, and well, the third thing on the overall stability of the state. I mean, as Ukraine is still threatened by Russia, I would wish that the huge expenses for defense, that they are really as efficiently and properly used as they should be used. There's so much money spent, and there is still also apparently a certain level of corruption, which is highly criminal given the threats that the country is exposed. So I would put, so to say, for the external security, really the factor to get this whole industry sector and the army and all the services that are attached to that to become as efficient as possible, to be as impressive to the enemy outside. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. You have shown quite a high level of consistency of your response. From me, I would also add another four factor. It's increasing the level of resistance of the population, so decreasing the level of its vulnerability in all domains, including in media, including socioeconomic and all other factors. So
health is on this point, because the colleague said that it is so necessary that the health reform is really implemented also in the second stage, according to the principle that money follows the patient, that the people know that they will be treated and the doctor knows that he will be paid for the work that he does. There, in this area, which affects everybody personally, health is the most personal thing. There, the state or the authorities and the doctors, they must deliver according what they have to do, and there the reforms must not be obstructed either.
Yes, thank you for pointing this out. So as I informed earlier, we do have questions. Two of them go to Mr. Yakimenko, one specific question to Mr. Geller. And Veronica, I take my liberty to give you the best question on where the hope is. So I will now read them. I received it on my WhatsApp. So two questions from our colleagues from the Martens Centre, Roland Prodenstein and Anna Nalivaika. So first question from Roland, and this is two questions to Mr. Yakimenko. How helpful are Ukrainian calls for a NATO membership action plan? Are they considered domestically necessary in the view of the Russian threats? This is number one. And number two question to you, Pane Yurio. Recently, President Zelensky announced the launch of the Crimea platform with the aim of returning Crimea to Ukraine. In the light of all the issues facing Ukraine, how realistic is this, in your opinion, and should it be Ukraine's top priority at the moment? So these are two questions to Pane Yurio. The next question to Mr. Geller, and it came from Mykola Savchenko. The question is the following. Thank you for thanking us for the discussion. And the question is, I guess, how would you assess, Mr. Geller, this is question to you. So how would you assess President Zelensky's endeavor to build Ukrainian resilience, especially on political and security levels, which are extremely important in given situation? I think it's more question on the efforts of Zelensky himself to put resilience on political and security areas. And Veronica, the question on the future and the hope to you, which came from Angela Howard. Sorry if I misspelled it. Beyond areas of resilience and areas of vulnerability, in which areas have Ukraine has seen the greatest improvement over the past couple of years? Which part of Ukraine's trajectory is the most well targeted? So, dear speakers, dear colleagues, we do have 10 minutes in total. So that's why I would like to ask all of you to be precise. And tell me, please, who wants to start? Pane Yuri, shall I give you the floor? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Elena. Thanks, colleagues, for their questions. I'm trying to be concise as possible. First question is related to Ukrainian prospects of becoming a member of NATO. I told already that one of major factors of our vulnerability is lack of reliable external security guarantees. And we understand well that membership in NATO would be such kind of reliable external, not external already, but security guarantees for Ukraine. As I refer to results of our opinion poll, as I must say that the majority of people from the same poll sees that membership in NATO could be the main guarantee of Ukrainian security and territorial integrity. So what is doing now by our leaders, our state leaders, and this international diplomacy, international relations, trying to move Ukraine closer to the goal of full-time membership in NATO, I think it is doing according to public demand and according to national interests of Ukraine. And as sooner it's happened, as better it would be for our country. It's my opinion in relations how to access those kind of appeals. It's the first question. Second is the Crimean platform. Crimean platform, I think it's also a very timely initiative because having continuous fighting in Donetsk region, in Donbass, step by step, question of Crimea was forgotten or doing on a second plan. And now this initiative, it is intended to draw more attention of our international partners and broaden the format of international attention and cooperation and support to Ukraine in this issue. I think that this platform, as will be, as also experts from think tanks, Ukrainian and internationally, will be taking part in this platform. I think it may be a useful mechanism and useful platform for approbation ideas or some kind of ways of solution of this problem in the future, and also serves as a platform for future international activities in this sphere of how to restore territorial integrity of Ukraine, especially how to turn back Crimea to Ukraine. So I think that initiative is timely and it may be and hope to be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yakimenko. Shall we move to Mr. Geller? Veronica, you want? Okay.
Oh, actually, sorry, I was happy the Mr. Geller would start, but okay, let me complete with Ukrainian, and then we will finish with the European view. What is the greatest importance, and do we have the hope? Where is the hope? I think I echo my colleagues that the deeper integration with European Union and NATO as the external anchor is very important part of the hope, because the history shows that with international anchors, the changes are working better. It worked in the part for our European neighbors, for Eastern Europe countries in their transformation, and it definitely helped also in Ukraine. We saw it with cases of WTO integration, with association agreement, the things that have very clear commitments with visa-free regime, commitments that have very clear measurable targets against which we can measure our, estimate our progress, and against which we can say we did or did not do something, deliver or not, is extremely helpful. Out of what we have in the past, what are the greatest improvements? I would say that one of the greatest, I mentioned already banks and energy, I would say the third one is, for example, public procurement reform. It has been, it is not yet now, one of the most corrupt spheres in the Ukrainian economic environment in the budget. Thanks to reforms, thanks to new technologies, it's one of the issues that are best reform examples in Ukraine. And it's a great example of what gives hope. Then it's a combination of interest and European integration perspective, opening of the new market. Everything jointly worked out good. Decentralization is other reform, but it's even more complex. So the hope is that we work jointly, and then we have the bright and clear goal, but not bright and far away, but with very clear roadmap, milestones, and measurable indicators against which we can compare. Then this hope is becoming not a hope, but a program to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Mr. Geller.
So when it's about the president's intentions and policies towards strengthening the security and of the country, I mean, on the one hand, politically speaking, it's fully legitimate that he pronounces clearly Ukraine's wish to join NATO and the EU. At the same time, I mean, perhaps one in brackets towards Russia, the fact that there is now a majority of Ukrainians wishing to join NATO is not because of NATO, but because of Mr. Putin. So he has himself, Putin has provoked this wish in Ukraine to join NATO. There's before the revolution of dignity, there was always, I think, a tendency to say majority, okay, in favor of EU, but not in favor of NATO. But since the Russian aggression, we have a majority also to join NATO. But that has Putin's way of defending his interests is a strange way. But now on the Ukrainian side, of course, for NATO members, the question to answer whether they accept any candidate or any applicant is the question: does this new member increase or decrease our security? That is the very sober question. And currently, I'm afraid that many member states, and certainly there would not be unanimity at this stage, many member states would at the moment say, if we take Ukraine in now, then we provoke Russia too much, you know these arguments. So on the one side, very legitimate the wish. On the other side, for at this moment, my guess is that there wouldn't be such a unanimity in favor, and so it would not happen. But we should make it very clear from our side, that we have within NATO. We consider also Ukraine's security part of our security. We are strengthening our eastern flank. We should do as much as possible in helping Ukraine getting better. And that is when the president has a strategy in this regard, I think he should order the relevant structures in Ukraine to really systematically cooperate or continue cooperation with NATO or US or European partners when it comes to capability development plans, when it comes to information sharing, when it comes to also joint exercises between partners in order simply de facto strengthening the capabilities of Ukraine. And I'm also, if he has these plans, I'm supportive also in public to deliver defensive weapons to Ukraine. When there is a tank waiting on the other side of the border to enter, he should be awaited with the anti-tank missile. And when the Americans deliver their Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, I welcome that. I would wish my Germans would do that as well. So when the president has a strategy, and he should be supported in this regard, and but it must also be systematic and in the best way possible in order not to waste energy and resources and manpower in uncoordinated activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gellers. Thank you, our dear speakers. So this is time to sum up, and I will kind of say some takes away. So the factors which play in increasing Ukraine's resilience, which our speakers have agreed today: rule of law, respect of constitution, strong institutions, accountability and transparency of the institutions, increasing people's resilience, and international cooperation and support. And with this, I think we made a very good conclusion on this. And summing up, I would like again to thank the speakers, would like to thank the participants for their active and participation and interesting questions, our partners from the Martens Centre, and our communication teams, which made this possible to hold this webinar. And with this, we keep in touch. We wish and we will definitely continue our work in bringing Ukraine at the spotlight and bringing more information about what is happening inside of the country, around the country, because we consider Ukraine as an important factor of European and international stability and security. And success of Ukraine is our joint success. And with this, with thanking all, I encourage also our audience to follow our newsletters to know what's new will come on Ukraine. And those of you, you can subscribe always to Ukraine Analytical Digest and to follow up the events. And with this, dear all, thank you. Have a nice rest of the day and see you all soon.
До побачення.
До побачення. Bye-bye.
Thank you. До побачення.